Hello everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Financial Insight Show. And I am currently at the Impact Capital Africa event at Cielo Resort in Lusaka, where I'm about to have a very interesting conversation on day 2 of this important investment summit. With me is Mike Tarney, who's a good friend of ours, who's going to tell me a little bit about this event and other issues pertaining to the electricity supply industry. Mark, how are you doing?
I'm doing well, thank you.
Good. It's always a pleasure to see you. And how have you found this year's Impact Capital event?
It's very well attended, very well organized, and showing some positive signs for the economy, I think. So I'm pleasantly surprised.
Absolutely. So you just came off a panel discussion. Sadly, I missed it, but what was the key takeaways for you from that panel discussion?
So this particular discussion was to look at financing sources and options and structures for startups, SMEs, more at the early stage. So it was emphasizing, there were 3 funds there in the local markets, all of which have available funding for startups, grants, loans, mentoring and things like that. They were explaining what they've got. Also said something about ZBAN, which is the Zambia Business Angels Network, about how we contribute to those areas as well. So we explored a number of the projects around agro, but a few other sectors as well. Best practices and what to do, most importantly what not to do, mistakes, so people could contribute, learn and enjoy each other's perspectives on things.
Absolutely. So like this year obviously attracted, we saw something very interesting on day 1 where the finance or the lending, or not, rather the capital side were also more or less pitching to this year's delegates. Because obviously you've got a lot of experience on the energy side, and everybody knows that Zambia is going through this power deficit and all. What have some of the conversations been like, if you've had any, with some of the investors that are looking to play in the energy space, and how do they feel about some of the pronouncements that have been coming from government?
Gosh, so the energy sector's got different segments. So on the sort of grid side, the mega projects tend mostly to attract big international companies. I think the projects to do with ZESCO have been delayed. I guess eventually we'll be able to resolve those because the IMF process will run its course and the country's balance sheets will improve. However, in the interim, we're seeing the private sector taking a bit more of a positive stance now. For CC's commissioned about 90 megawatts of solar financed through a green bond. We're looking at other players looking to sell power directly to the large users and use the sort of open access system. And I have to say the government is just recently approved the open access framework and making it easier for power trading to take place in the country. So in the absence of having billions of dollars available to the government, people are starting to think up solutions to enable the market to move forward. So it's quite exciting in that sense. We're seeing more movement now than perhaps 2-3 years ago.
Right, and I mean obviously this hydrology situation does present its own challenges. So with the crisis that we actually have right now, are investors now becoming a bit more bullish about Zambia in terms of investing in projects in Zambia?
In my view, investors never went away. I think the problem we had was the balance sheet issues with the selling power to the government and the perceptions of the lenders, and the fact that there were defaults or anticipated defaults in various facilities. So we have a lot of bankable projects in the country, but not necessarily the government itself. The mines where we're banking copper or other minerals or other resources that the country has. So we need to think differently about financing, see how we can use the security that we have to remove reliance on governments to provide those guarantees and look for other sources, other mechanisms to do that. So that's where I see the market going. Also, another factor is go for smaller projects. Maybe for, like in the power sector, we see this load shedding. However, if you put in your own panels, your own batteries, invest in your own equipment, you're in control of your destiny to some extent, and you can mitigate some of the effects of ZESCO's load shedding. So we're seeing a much stronger uptake of those small to medium projects where people start taking control of their own destiny, and we'll see a lot more of that. That's also much better for smaller companies. There's more innovations, there's more jobs created. So in that sense, it's also more exciting at the bottom end. That also applies to the off-grid sector. There's more products coming out, including e-transport now, electric. We're seeing a few models of electric bicycles. I think we'll start to see electric vans and vehicles over future years as well. Hopefully some will be manufactured here in Zambia. And even though we see the fancy Teslas, big international companies, we're also seeing some local solutions from Zambian companies or African companies in these areas as well. So it's quite an exciting time in the industry to see how the things play out. And how people can make money and make jobs.
Absolutely. And speaking of making money, I know that there's always this issue about the role that IPPs can actually play. I think, do you believe that now more than ever, IPPs obviously need to step up and
Yes.
be part of the solution?
No, absolutely. I mean, we're fine to blame the load shedding on Kariba. Yes, that's a factor. But to me, the bigger factor is the fact that we haven't had any new investments, apart from, I think, CC recently.
Correct, yes.
Whereas we need to have about 300 megawatts a year. The Zambian economy is growing. Why? Well, because the population is growing.
Yes.
We are connecting more and more people. Once people are connected, they need power forever. The money sector is growing now. So we're seeing these new developments. So there's no new power capacity. So that can only come through investments in new plants. And IPPs is the way forward. Having worked on the IRP, the initial projects were suggesting it could be solar and wind. However,
Yes.
still a lot of hydro to come. In the north of the country, we think is highly underexploited. We need to look north. But other sources too, we have geothermal, there is more coal at Mamba, etc., etc. So, but it's also about timing. We need to move quickly.
Absolutely, absolutely. But then, speaking of moving quickly, I know that there's always been that thorny issue about cost-reflective tariffs. We've had, cost of service studies before, but then what was quite significant was obviously the 2019 Electricity Act.
Yes.
That now obviously just requires a bit more, maybe say operationalization.
Yes.
And I think obviously with last year's announcement for the multi-year tariff determination, that obviously now changes the game. Do you think these are the sort of measures that now need to obviously be actualized for the ESI to be conducive?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think the critical steps have been identified for the last few years and have been quietly been implemented. So I've seen ZESCO's sort of overdue debts coming down. They've been renegotiating tariffs downwards from the IPPs. They've been gradually dealing with their issues. Unfortunately, this drought and load shedding hasn't helped, but under normal circumstances, we've seen a rapid improvement in their balance sheet. And I think there's a need to tell the good parts as well as the bad parts about the story. I think going forward, the tariffs are now much more cost reflective, and there shouldn't really be a problem in financing new plant going forward, as long as it's done in a measured and controlled way. Okay. Based on the analysis I've worked on personally, I think ZESCO will be looking quite strong within about 4 years. I think that was a year ago, so maybe 3 years to go.
I just had a comment around the issues on the sustainability of the ESI. How important is it to have a very strong regulatory regime in the ESI?
Well, it's important, but also the regulator needs to make sure the market takes off, meaning rather than focusing on regulating everyone's tariffs, if there's certain parts of the market, you should focus on introducing competition. And what it means there is having open access, so it's easy for people to trade within the country, to get access to ZESCO's network or CC's network. They know what they have to pay, the contracts are standardized, and they can quickly put together a trading transaction. So I think that's the way they should focus, and in fact they are focusing on that. I think they've done some good work there, but it's not quite finished off yet, so we need to make sure everything works. So you allow people to innovate, so rather than having ZESCO to do absolutely everything.
Exactly.
ZESCO can do quite a lot, but they can't do everything, so let's help them out. Let's see what others can do as well.
Absolutely. Now, I know you've always had conversations within the region as well, so what's the outlook looking like for the region, and is obviously this integration, being part of SAP, is that more important than ever? Because we do know that there have been efforts to try and import power, etc. But how do you look at the whole integration structure?
Well, the integration of SAPP, Southern African Power Pool, has been actually, if that hadn't have happened, we'd have been in a far worse situation. So we do see power traded between Mozambique, South Africa, Zambia, Zimbabwe, Namibia on an hourly basis, pretty much the whole time. Sometimes there's a deficit or surplus in one country, sometimes it reverses. The really exciting development that we're anticipating for the next 2 or 3 years, probably 2 years from now, is the Zambia-Tanzania interconnector.
Right.
So I think there's about 14 countries connected in the East African Power Pool, going up all the way up to Libya, plus the SAP-connected countries. So we're seeing more than 20 countries connected. Any of these countries can trade between each other. So in East Africa, we have Ethiopia with a large amount of surplus hydropower. In Tanzania, they're in the process of commissioning a very large hydro plant not far from the Zambian border, Julius Nyerere hydro plant. So in some of these other markets, there's a power surplus. So temporarily, Zambia can probably import this power at a cheaper rate than it currently is. And in any case, there'll be more competition. So with the surplus power, there'll be multiple sources and brings the prices down for consumers. It's better for everybody. But of course, the plan is for Zambia to be a powerhouse. So we also have a surplus here, and we can also export to those countries which need it from us. we're a stable country. We can get it right
Yeah.
and lead the pack. We have plenty of companies here, so I'm sure we'll do so in the end.
All right, Mr. Tarney, thank you so much for speaking to us. That was quite insightful, especially around the energy sector. But then, any key takeaway, final thoughts about this year's event?
It's a wonderful event. It's a good mix of people here. We have people from different parts of Zambia, people from the region, people from the United States. Quite impressed. I mean, people are starting to take an interest in Zambia, so that's good.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. So there you have it yourselves. Thank you so much for watching this particular episode. Stay tuned for more insights on the Financial Insight platforms and get to know.